Dear ladies and gentlemen, пані та панове, can you believe this is already 21st episode in our series of conversations of Ukrainian and foreign intellectuals about the war in Ukraine? We are discussing here different angles of Russia's invasion to Ukraine and looking for some answers to the complicated questions about the freedom of expression, cultural dialogues, and words' position on ongoing war. We are doing it to share this knowledge with you, our listeners, working to learn more, think deeper, and hear from the original sources. Важко повірити, але це вже 21-й епізод нашої серії розмов поміж українськими та зарубіжними інтелектуалами про війну в Україні. Ми обговорюємо тут різні точки зору вторгнення Росії в Україну і шукаємо відповіді на складні питання про свободу слова, діалоги культур та позицію світу щодо війни, яка триває. Ми робимо це, аби поділитися цими знаннями із вами, нашими слухачами, які прагнуть дізнатися більше, думати глибше та чути з першоджерел. This is a project of PEN Ukraine, whose entire team is in Ukraine right now, besieged by the terror and the violence of the continuing invasion of the Russian army. And I will repeat again and again how much we all admire your dedication to spread the truth and uphold the freedom of expression. Це проєкт PEN Україна, вся команда якого і надалі перебуває в Україні в облозі терору та насильства триваючого вторгнення російської армії. І я повторюватиму знову і знову, наскільки ми усі захоплюємося вашою відданістю, поширенню правди і захистом свободи вираження поглядів. One of our volunteers fighting for the people's lives is Evgen Stasinevich, a well-known literary critic who systematically collects aid for Kharkiv and the region. Medicine, various humanitarian supply, and food. He buys and delivers. Kharkiv will be grateful to you for any donation. Please find all the details in the comment. Одним із волонтерів, які борються за життя людей в Україні, є Євген Стасіневич, відомий літературознавець, який систематично збирає допомогу для Харкова та області, здебільшого ліки, розмаїту гуманітарну допомогу та продукти харчування. Він купує та доставляє, тому Харків буде вдячний вам за будь-яку пожертву. Будь ласка, знайдіть усі деталі у коментарях. The project is co-hosted by PEN International, which has continued to provide a platform for freedom of expression for those currently under the highest risk. We work under the PEN International Charter. Співорганізатором проєкту є Міжнародний ПЕН, який продовжує надавати платформу для свободи вираження поглядів тим, хто перебуває у групі найвищого ризику. Ми дотримуємося хартії Міжнародного ПЕН. We are grateful to our partners for today, who are traditionally PEN America, the Ukrainian Institute London, Ukraine World, the Harvard University Ukrainian Research Institute, and the Harman Institute at Columbia University. Special thanks goes to Oksana Zebro and Old Flying Publisher House for making things happen. We are streaming today's event to all partners' Facebook pages. Сьогодні нашими партнерами є традиційно PEN America, Український інститут Лондона, Україна Світ, Український науково-дослідний інститут Гарвардського університету та інститут Гаррімана при Колумбійському університеті. Окрема вдячність Оксані Зьобро та видавництву Старого Лева за допомогу в організації події. Ми транслюємо сьогоднішню подію на всі партнерські сторінки у Facebook. Захід відбуватиметься англійською мовою. And from Ukrainian side, I'm happy to welcome Petro Yatsenko, the author of 11 books, who writes for adults and children too, and also teaches creative writing. Honestly, it was challenging sometimes for me to recognize which books were for whom. Petro has received numerous national literary awards. His latest novel, The Union of Soviet Things, won a BBC Children's Book of the Year 2021 prize, and it's probably my favorite one. The Magnetism novel was shortlisted for the Angelus Central European Literature Award last year. And novel Don't Listen, Don't Speak, Don't Look won its author a UNESCO City of Literature First Award back in 2018. We just had another interview straight before the invasion, and we're talking a lot about the context of cultural invasion as post-colonial trauma and how to rework it. And I believe now we are in the position when Ukrainians are really rebuilding themselves somehow, especially in the cultural way. And in your last essay for Znak, for Polish magazine, You call this war the war between two cultures, culture of love and care, and culture without love, empathy and lack of empathy. I believe this is a theme of our second speaker have something to share too. Petro will speak today with Paolo Giordano, a youngest Italian writer who won the prestigious Premio Stegman Literary Award with his first brilliant novel, The Solitude of Prime Numbers. I read it, I believe, like 5 times. And The Solitude of Prime Numbers has sold over 1 million copies and was translated into 30 languages. I'm proud to tell that I covered at least 10 of them, giving it to my friends as a gift. Paolo studied physics at the University of Turin and holds PhD in theoretical particle physics. And it's absolutely incredible how he applies the physics laws to the human being and relationship. Especially I like the idea of symmetry. And also his book, How Contagion Works, is one of the first written of the COVID pandemic and warns of the dangers of authoritarianism. Here we can also discuss how your forecast worked or not. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, dear gentlemen. And the floor is yours. Paolo, please.
Thank you, Olga. Hello, everybody. Hello, Petro. First, let me tell you that I'm very happy to have received this invitation because it helps me selfishly with a sense of uselessness that I think many of us have felt since the start of this invasion now 70 days ago, more than 70 days ago. So during the first week at the end of February, I remained almost stuck for days. I was completely divided between the idea of staying here or leaving and reaching Lviv or Kiev or anywhere in Ukraine to do, I didn't know exactly what. I assumed just to report and be there and witness. And then I figured out that probably my presence would just be of another obstacle. So what I did instead was to contact the people I knew from my publisher there, the old Lion Publishing House, which I know I share with Petro, and help and ask them to gather as many writers, poets, and intellectuals they could in a very short time, people I could talk with and that I could interview when things were still very hectic and confused. And so I talked for a whole day with them via Zoom, like we're doing now, and I collected their testimonies of those early times of this war. So this feels to me like a sort of continuation of that process that I started. And I know this is meant to be a conversation, but of course we're not in a symmetric position. And as I'm sure all of the people who are listening, there are so many things that I'm curious to know from Petro, so I will probably keep on asking him questions. And the first one is, I think, very simple and very obvious, but not obvious at all right now. So I would like to ask you where you are and how you are and what you're involved with in this stage of the war.
Thank you so much, dear Paolo. I'm so happy to talk about this war and all this situation with you. And you are not useless at all, because you are interested, very interested in this story and this, in this whole situation. And for me, it's very significant. to asking your question, I met with that war the first day. I lived near Kyiv in Bucha district, well-known non-Bucha district. We heard in 5 o'clock in the morning, we heard this first 2 explosions. Russian missiles was not nearby, but not far enough. We heard it, and we decided to leave because my colleague, I haven't a car, but my colleague has one, and he called me and said, well, now or never, you can just leave to, and we decided to leave to Lviv, because it's my city where I was born, where I spent a lot of time, and I have an apartment here as well, and we decided to leave. And it was, I don't know, it was, I guess, bad or good decision. Generally, I decided to do it because I have my military office here in Lviv too. So they are able to reach me as well. And, you know, I know all Ukrainians were able to read news, some news, watch TV, and during last 3-4 months, there were a lot of information that Russian troops are around Ukraine. They are surrounding us, and we should be ready for some war. But psychologically or somehow in other way, you can't. I realize it finally that it's impossible to be ready for war, for such a tragedy. And we gathered some things in small backpacks, and we made it 3 times before the war. And every time we unpacked it again and packed in after some next very, you know, Putin's speech from the TV, and generally we were not ready. I guess generally we are not ready even now, because we weren't stuck too for the first months. We just I wasn't able to write anything. We just tried to catch our friends in Kyiv region and Bucha region, and put them to safer places. So it was our first aim for this time. The first, yeah.
I mean, the last time I talked to people this way, people in Lviv, but also in Kharkiv at that moment, and Lviv was still relatively safe, so it was unhit until that moment, because it was hit later. But people were all in a kind of shocked reaction. So it was still the very early moment that you were describing. So I was wondering what changed in your perspective. Before we were live, we were shortly talking about denial that is something that we've all known in the last years for other reasons, for the pandemic and so on. And you were briefly mentioning the denial that is also present there. And I think that is very interesting inner perspective that we don't get here. So how the overall feeling has changed in your opinion, especially in a city like Lviv that is now sometimes hit, but it's not at the center of the fights and so on and so forth.
We discussed about that situation a lot with my friends before. Is it okay to deny the war, or is it okay to have such a well, not very safe, but generally peace keeping place in Ukraine, because we know that Western Ukraine is quite far, and sometimes Russian missiles are hitting some aims here, but generally we have a lot of people on the streets. We have a very, firstly, I visited Lviv to the second day or third day of the war. It was empty, and shelves in stores were empty too. And when I traveled by car, we heard a Ukrainian radio station, and I thought, is it the end of Ukrainian culture? Is it all the last Ukrainian broadcasting we can hear? What will happen with our books? What will happen with our museums, with our culture tradition? Because Putin said he wants to denazificate us. And in his very strange language, it means he wants just destroy us, just erase us. And now I'm happy that in Lviv streets life looking like just before the war. We have a lot of coffee shops opened, a lot of stores, shelves are full of different things, goods, and you can pay card, you can call your phone, you can hear Ukrainian radio, you have an internet connection. So for me, it's very good that Ukraine now theoretically divided into three parts. First part is a war part, where people are fighting with Russian troops. The second part is part of some evacuation, where people, where women with kids are going, where from women going to abroad via Lviv and have short stops here. And the third part, where we keep in our peaceful life. We are trying to save this peaceful life for us to just, you know, like in the refrigerator, we are safe in our pre-war life. And it's significant for me. It means that we can be able to spread this peaceful life to all other occupied regions after war will end.
You sent me, you wrote a text that you sent me yesterday, and I had it translated with Google, so maybe not very precisely, but I got the overall sense, and maybe Olha mentioned it already. And there is a passage that I found very meaningful, especially from, you know, there are many things that are raising mixed and very controversial reactions outside of Ukraine. So I don't know how people there are aware of how the debate is divided sometimes in countries like Italy, sometimes in very twisted ways. And something that you wrote kind of pointed to a very meaningful question, I think. You were mentioning a story, your last visit to Russia to meet your relatives there, and the situation that you found and the reactions that you found to Ukraine, that was way before this war. And so I think it's very interesting for all the people to hear that, and to trace this war a little on back to the years that were before, because one of the things that are completely lacking here in Western countries of Europe is the idea that this didn't come just out of the blue on February 24th, but it's a slow and long path that has been building in the history of Ukraine and Russia, and in the Donbas conflict, but even before, and in the propaganda. So I think that that episode makes it kind of clear.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Really, 1/4 part of my blood is Russian, and I have a lot of relatives in Russia, in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, as well, on the very eastern part of Russia as well. And my grandmother originated from the very center part in Siberia, very central part of Russia. And my father was born in Norilsk city. It's beyond the Arctic circle, a northern Arctic circle, and there even no sun during weeks in the winter. And my relatives was very friendly to us before, and last time I met with them in 2003. It was exactly about 20 years ago, and even and Putin started his first president's term. I believe in 2000, and even during that times, it was 3 years after Putin started to be Russian president, there were a lot of propaganda on the TV, and my relatives said, well, why Ukraine was so strictly divided from us? It's so pity, and we are so, not happy about that. And I said, okay, but we have no borders at all. And for you, it's very easy to reach my city, Lviv. You just need to buy train tickets, and we had no visas. Even before this war, we had no visas with Russia. I don't know really why, but it was very easy for Russian people to go to Ukraine and check what's happening here, and to look at all these Nazis, as they said, with their own eyes. But nobody wanted to do it. And my relatives, even 20 years ago, they believed to Russian TV, not for us. And they, they were, this Russian propaganda, I believe, isn't so professional. It's good level of propaganda, very professional, of course, but it's quite simple things. I guess it fits Russians because it touches very internal things in the Russian soul, with this imperial power. They need it, and Putin gave it to Russians, and they can't believe that. Well, they can't believe us, their relatives, that they killing us, that they throwing bombs to us, and a lot of people around Ukraine who had relatives in Russia now can't even talk with them because they are refusing all the facts we can say them. They say it's not true because our TV says Russian army bombs just Nazis, not Ukrainian people. And you can do nothing with that. It's very looks like a religious sect, not. You can. It's very good point to investigate this after that war. Investigate on the world level how this propaganda can go all the nation to this war, and how to prevent that in the future.
I can just give you the Italian perspective on this, and it's become very evident and very clear in the last weeks that this propaganda is not just something that is confined to Russia, but it's a much wider, I wouldn't say whether to call it a plot, because it could be in a way some sort of conspiracy idea in itself, but for sure it's been going on even out of Russia for a long time. And there's been talk about this in Italy in one of our last elections, because as in the United States and as in many other parts of the world, there were signs of Russian interference in the games of in the political set, but I think it wasn't clear as we're seeing it now. And the interesting thing that is happening is that this sort of Russian underlying propaganda that's been working for years in many ways has somehow attached itself and combined itself with very ancient ideas that are in the countries, that are in our country, like especially a very deep anti-American feeling that has been very strong in Italy, stronger than in other places because of our history. And so it's like, especially the left part of the country is completely divided in this moment, and it's very difficult to understand what the majority of people would think, how they would really react to the idea of sending weapons to Ukraine or supporting Ukraine actively. So the feeling is somehow shifting during the weeks, and that is kind of worrying to witness, I have to admit, from my perspective. And when I read the story that you were mentioning, your personal story, it kind of clicked with me because of this. I recognize it in this underlying thing that's been going on, and it's becoming now very, very relevant. And so I was wondering, from your perspective, how do you now react when people abroad, or I don't know if even in Ukraine, but when people describe this as a war between brothers? Because that's something that has been said a lot, especially during the first moments of the war. So, and it kind of made it much more suspicious to many of the people outside of many of the countries outside, because you don't want to step into a war that is between brothers. It becomes family business. So the consequence of this idea that is a war between brothers are
The
kind of
police
strong.
will not be called because something, a small war between brothers will call the police. Okay, yeah, it's thank you. It's a very long story about this brotherhood, so named brotherhood. It comes from Soviet period generally, where communist propaganda said that all people in Soviet Union are brothers, and even workers all around the world are brothers too. And especially brothers, first brothers are Slavic population, like Russian population around Moscow, and Belarusian and Ukraine as well. It was pseudo historian theory that was produced to somehow to make people recognize why so different countries are in one imperium, in one very big formation. It was, you know, just we heard about it in school, courses, so on. But it was very difficult to explain for us why we are brothers with, for example, some Eastern population, because we have different, very different cultures, and so on. And generally and historically, Ukraine was, in case you can say brothers, historically we was in one big formation with Poland and with Belarus and with Lithuania as well, but not with Russia. And to say we are brothers, Ukrainians and Russians, we are completely different, because it's the same as to say that Italians and French people are brothers. Okay, we are nearby, we are neighbors, we have sometimes very close culture and very close connections, but generally it's impossible to say that it's there are any special brotherhood or something else like that. We just different. We just have very different languages, and Russians can't understand Ukrainian. Generally, Ukrainians are no Russian language, because we studied it in school. Russians never studied Ukrainian in the schools, and they can't understand us. They can't read our books. They can't deeply understand our culture. And maybe that's why Putin decided to invade, because he thought he has very deep lack of knowledge about Ukraine. And he thought that we are just Ukrainians, just people who are trying to be different from Russians. It was a very great mistake, I believe. And it was deeply misunderstood of Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian roots of our, of our country. And it was very, during communist time, it was very popular idea that Ukrainians and Russians are brothers, but it's not true. It's not true.
And since now the war has officially moved back to the Donbas region, even though there are shellings still everywhere, but how would you describe the Donbas situation to people who are out of Ukraine, because that's something that's been going on much longer, and it's kind of part, I feel that is becoming even at simple level of public debate outside of Ukraine, which is relevant, of course, because Ukraine needs the support of all the countries, as we know. So the public debate is somehow very relevant. And the Donbas situation is somehow that, in my opinion, might shift again the attitude of other countries, because it's an older war, and it's seen here as a much more complicated and controversial situation because of the Russian-speaking people who are there, and the war that has been going on. So how would you, from within Ukraine, describe that situation outside?
My family has experience with it too, because my second grandmother was born in Donetsk city. It's a capital of Donbas region, and I have relatives still there in the occupied territory. They are on the occupied territories, and this story is quite complicated and simple as well. The Donbas region, generally, historically, it was very special part of Ukraine, because Donetsk was founded by John Hughes. He was a British citizen. It was in the middle of 19th century, and a lot of workers was involved in this industrial region during a lot of years, and it was from Russia, from Poland, from Ukraine as well, and even from Great Britain, all around the world, even from Greece. And there were a lot of this Donetsk city was like in New York in America, and it was mostly Russian-speaking region, because it was in the Russian Empire firstly, and then after communists took that territory, this all plants, all coal mines were so-called nationalized, and this region was not so because Ukraine is generally agriculture, a lot of different businesses, but that was historically a region with industrial power plants, whereas a lot that produced iron, that produced coal, and it was a bit different. And during the independence time, it's very good to know that just before Ukraine got its independence more than 30 years ago, these miners had a very strong protests against Soviet Union, and they were very pro-Ukrainian. And they voted for Ukrainian independence in 1991. Then, after years of independence, there were very huge influence of Russian propaganda as well, Russian money. And they said, you are different, you are very special, so it's very good for you to be a bit independent. And when I called to my relatives there, they said, well, and of course, it was possible because Ukrainians were divided economically, because on the western part and eastern part, so far away from each other, and there we were no money for some period to have a long trips in different parts of the country. And it was a point that allowed the propaganda to divide us a bit. And then in 2014, Russians said that, okay, you can be independent for these pieces of Donbass, and we will support you with weapon, we will support you with money. And they say, they really saw that they will live a bit better than all around Ukraine. And then tried, but then our relatives called us and said, well, it was a mistake. Well, we see that in Ukraine, it's much better. And Ukraine tried to build a Ukrainian cities of Donbass, because not all Donbass, just small part of Donbass was occupied by Russian troops. And Ukraine wanted to show these occupied territories that on these free cities, you can have very rich life, a lot of new buildings, so on. I was in Mariupol last autumn in September, and it was very beautiful city, very cozy, all renovated. And I can't believe now that all that buildings, all that streets, all that coffee shops, cozy places was completely destroyed. And for me, it's a catastrophe.
There is, since we're in a literary event as well, when a war starts, art doesn't look like the first priority, of course, but there were images coming from Lviv in the first weeks, and I know, and you mentioned this also in the piece that you sent me about picture of people who are removing this big Christ statue from a church and I saw, I think it was, I don't know, I'm not sure if it was from Lviv, but a statue that was completely covered with sandbags to protect it from the bombing. So that's another layer of war probably that writers and artists and intellectuals are experiencing. So maybe you have some small stories to share about this, because I think it's meaningful for an audience like this one, to save the beauty also in a moment like this.
A friend of mine, French writer Ludovic Allert, visited Lviv, and we visited Kyiv with him. And when we were back to Lviv, he said, well, it's impossible that such a beautiful city with very ancient, beautiful buildings can be bombed. I can't believe it. And I said, well, I can't believe it too, but we need to be prepared. And a lot of statues, a lot of monuments was protected with sandbags, and there's a picture gallery nearby my house in the center, and it was this basement windows was reinforced with that sandbags too. We have all exponents, all pictures was moved, I believe. I don't know, there's a secret places, but I believe in some basements, in special shelters. where it can survive, they can survive some bombings, I hope. But I know that in case Russian bomb will be thrown nearby, it won't help. It's, just a part of our psychological, protection. You need to do something. You can't just catch that bomb. You can't just try to protect some pieces of art, pieces of architecture, and try to protect it somehow with means it's reachable for you. And generally, for me, I don't know really. I know that now culture, now masterpieces can protect you from this Russian bomb. It's just uncomparable things. But generally, we believe that our magic, our daily magic, will help us. We believe in our armed forces, in our anti-missile protection, but the last magic things is our culture. That for me it has like a transparent shelter all around the city. I know that's magical thinking, but I want to believe it. Yeah.
Ukrainian culture has been struggling, no? Even before this war. Maybe it won't struggle anymore when this war is over, because of course the eyes of the world have been on Ukraine for so much time. But I remember when I was there the last time, this was something that was discussed a lot also among writers and publishers, that Ukrainian culture was somehow still I'm talking about literature and books, for instance, but it felt like it was still very fragile, and it was slowly starting to spread with a small market and the need for a translation, for foreign books to be translated into Ukraine. So there was a lot of effort put into this. And so since we're connected to PEN Ukraine, how do you see this developing? Do you think this will give a boost eventually to Ukrainian culture abroad and within Ukraine, or it will be a kind of obstacle to that process?
On my own experience, I see the very, very big interest about Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian literature in Ukrainian literature as a part of Ukrainian culture. And I see a lot of first months, it was a lot of interviews for me and for my colleagues, because I know a lot of my colleagues, they gave a lot of interviews all around the world for newspapers, TV channels, so on, so on. And now we have much more interest from translators. And, this is one case of that situation. We had a lot of Ukrainian printing houses in Kharkiv city. It's now under Russian bombs, and it's a front line. And that printing houses are closed, of course, and we can't print our books in Ukraine. Generally, we can, but very few of them is now available for us. And the European Union proposed to print our books in Europe. and then gave these books for our kids, for our children's, Ukrainian children's. They are now unable to read Ukrainian books, and it's very significant for them because we need to gather them together to because a lot of children's from their yards, their schools, their libraries, where they were able to be together. They are now all around Europe, different countries, and we need to gather them together. And a lot of children writers are trying to gather via Zoom calls, via some events, via the books, and it's very, very good for us. And I'm very thankful for all the people around, culture people around the world that are supporting us in that very, very good initiative.
This problem with Ukrainian children who are now abroad and who cannot read Ukrainian books in their own language or textbooks is something that I had been discussing it with people at the Old Lion Publishing House, and it's one of those things that you simply don't think about. It's like we're focused always on the main things about this war, always talking obsessively about the same things, at least here. But then there are so many small rivers in which the war expresses itself, like this small, big problem with children's books. Since you are also a children's books author, you're probably more sensitive to it, but there was something that struck me mostly because of our complete lack of awareness of how big and diffused this problem is, and this situation is, especially for Ukrainian people. I know Olga is reappears, so it means we're almost closing, and I just wanted to have one last
maybe excuse me, maybe I can ask you some question, because you are asking me a lot, but I had no chance to ask you.
Yeah, but that's the asymmetry that I was mentioning in the beginning, and I think it's pretty normal. There will come a time.
Okay.
But I know everybody here is very, in the newspapers, and everybody's now very focused on May 9. So it's like everybody's expecting the situation to be kind of stable, or sort of stable, until May 9, and then May 9 something will happen, something will change, something will be revealed. So I was really curious to know what are your expectations, and what is the feeling in Ukraine about what is going to happen?
First days, we expected that this war will end in like a couple of days. Then after that couple of days gone, we expected it will finish in weeks. Today, then months. Now we have a third month, and we expecting that it will finish like to the end of this summer, or even to the end of this year. And some days ago, I heard that some experts thought that this war can be like more than 2 years, to the end of 2023. Generally, I believe it's for us, all of us, it would be good in case it will finish today evening, but we know that it's impossible, because Putin will never stop until he has some power, some meat for this meat as his soldiers and some money. And we know that people's lives are nothing for him, and he will continue. It depends on Putin, and it depends of Russian citizens that are supporting him. So it's a pity to say, but we have Ukrainians just need to fight against it to prevent him to prevent Russia to destroy us, erase us, denazificate us, but nobody knows what does it mean. And generally, we with European, United States, and all around world support, we will survive, of course. I know that, and all we here know that we will survive, and Ukraine will be, and the Ukrainian culture will be as well, and Ukrainian children are in the safe place. We are trying to move all of them, and women and children as well, and we will fight this Nazi Russia, because in case we will fall down, then Russia will invade Poland, Baltic states, and so on. And okay, it's our historical mission, and we should do it.
Olha,
thank you. Thank you so much. Do you know they removed that denazification from their agenda, as nobody could really explain what is it? So basically it's been removed over the last couple of weeks because just nobody in the army or just common society could really explain what they meant by that.
But we can feel what does it mean, but we can't explain.
Exactly, but I mean that from the Russian side, right? And thank you, dear gentlemen, for this conversation and for touching the ground of personal perception of war and the situation then words suddenly changed, for picturing those destroyed and empty cities, and about the nature of denial, which is probably our deep coping mechanism. We need so bad to stay sane when the whole world is falling apart. And also to talking about how propaganda can be this baseline and a key replacing the critical thinking and relations, even within one family, as you shared about yours, Petro, right?
Yeah.
And what I found also very important, this is a topic of brotherhood. It seems to be especially important to reload this Kremlin agenda of seeing Ukraine only through the Russian lens. And this is what we meet in a lot of times when we are talking about the Slavic studies, for example, right? Because those are basically avoiding talking about all the other Slavic cultures. And this is what our conversations are about, just to try to find the answers to the question, what can I do today? Today, I should also quote Petro, follow your daily magic, discover Ukrainian culture, give it a boost, and think about the future. But at the same time, be aware. Fight the propaganda, learn to read between lines, and be responsible about your sources. We're grateful to our speakers. We're grateful to our partners for today's event, personally to Oksana Zobro and Outline Publisher House for making things happen, and our traditional partners, PAN America, the Ukrainian Institute London, Ukraine World, the Harvard University Ukrainian Research Institute, and the Harriman Institute at Columbia University, and for all the cross-streaming service at all the partners' pages. Gratitude, of course, to PAN Ukraine, which continues to stand on the front lines in the name of freedom and truth. And I want to remind you about the important fundraising initiative of Evgen Stasinevich, well-known literary critic who switched to be a volunteer and systematically collects aids for Kharkiv and the region. Medicine and various humanitarian food he buys and delivers. Kharkiv will be grateful for any donation. Please find all the details in comments. Ukraine need your help. PAN International is proud to be a platform that supports freedom of expression. Thank you one more time. The next episode will be held next week, probably on Thursday. follow our updates. And our guests will be Adam Kayan, Director of Reyes Partners and author of Solving Tough Problems, and Lyubov Cybulska. Follow our dialogues on war, spread the word, and stand with Ukraine. This is our shared responsibility today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Olga. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much, Paola and Olga.